Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Murphy's local update. I have with me tonight an esteemed member of the faculty of Genesee Community College and a dean as well. We all know Phil Venditti. He's been on our show on several other occasions, but Phil is here tonight, and I just wanted to say hello. Hello, Phil. How are you?
Just fine, Courtney.
It's great. When we talked last time, we talked a little bit about a global education and things of that nature. But and I know your commitment to these areas. But tonight we want to talk about something that's a little close to home and close to your heart. I want to talk a little bit about bureaucracies and how they affect us, and simply the nature of them. Since everything in the news kind of revolves around this with the healthcare issues and the political issues. I think it's a very, very timely topic to talk about. Can you define a little bit of that for us?
Sure. Well, I'd say as you pointed out, what I'd like us to do is to talk about what bureaucracies are, and then talk a little bit about, or try to explore, what we can do about them, or what we as citizens can do to survive them, either as members of them or as people who come and have to deal with them. There are a lot of stereotypes and a lot of things that make us mad about organizations that we think of as bureaucracies. And so, I mean, it's easy to think of those. There's the case of the 11-year-old kid in Florida who had a lemonade stand, and the health department came through and shut down his lemonade stand because he didn't have restroom facilities. And we think, this is crazy. This is absolutely crazy. In England, they established a position, a civil service position, in the early 1800s, 1803, for someone to stand on top of the cliffs of Dover and watch for Napoleon coming to invade. That position was abolished in 1945. We think of situations, even the IRS. They had some character in the IRS in the South, I believe it was, who was going out on official collection calls, and he went to somebody's house to get some money or to do something official. And the man he met there pulled a gun on him, drove him several hundred miles, made him drive his own car several hundred miles, and then finally let him go. Well, you can imagine how the man felt. He was a wreck, practically, the IRS man was. He went back home, and the next Monday he went to his office and applied for mileage. And they turned him down because they said you only get mileage for activities that specifically contribute to the conduct of your business.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the kind of thing we think of when we think of bureaucracies. Totally mindless kinds of regulations. People are not involved at all. Rules only are involved, that kind of thing. So that's where I think we can start in terms of what bureaucracies usually.
Right. We all have our own horror stories or things that we've read. I know about Proxmire's pet peeves with government bureaucracies. I mean, millions of dollars are spent to study the mating habits of eagles and things of that nature, when there are so many difficult social problems that need to be resolved.
Well, it's easy to take potshots at bureaucracies.
Right.
But I think it is important to know that there are some good reasons why bureaucratic structures first got started. As you may be aware, bureaucracy really began in the late 19th century in Europe, and the person who first described the bureaucracy and who first said that there were good things about it and said what those things might be was Max Weber. He believed that there were some great advantages to a bureaucratic structure. For instance, prior to that time, a lot of the advancement of people in the army, in civil service and so on, had been done purely by personal connections. You couldn't count on being treated fairly when you got into an organization. And one of the advantages of bureaucracy was that supposedly you would be. There was what's called a hierarchy of authority, a chain of command, so that there would be an efficient way for determining how decisions should be made. Prior to that, or even now in some organizations, you just can't count on that. That's one feature of bureaucracy, the hierarchy of authority. Division of labor. Specialization is another feature of bureaucracy, which is supposed to be good in that it capitalizes on your skill in doing one thing, my skill in doing something else, so that we're both making a valid contribution to the organization, and then we have someone else over here trained for something else. There's some good things about that, as opposed to everybody contending all the time for who's going to do what, who knows what. There's some good reasons for that. One thing that goes awry often is what's called impersonal orientation. Now, Weber's idea was that you take favoritism out of the organization by making sure that each individual in the organization and each individual who comes to the organization is going to be treated the same as everyone else. In other words, I don't care whether you've got a special problem, and I don't care if you've got a special axe to grind, and I don't care if you know my aunt and uncle. If you come to a bureaucracy, you will deserve the same treatment and the same response as everyone else. So, in the abstract, that sounds pretty good. There is also, one of the other features of bureaucracy is the career orientation, which means that if you start out within the hierarchy at point X, and you perform well, and you've been there long enough, it's natural that you will go to point Y and then to point Z until eventually you hit the top of the organization. And ideally, that should happen on the basis, again, of how well you perform and how long you've been there. Everyone, again, is placed in the same context and has the same opportunity for advancement. So that sounds pretty good. And then the last feature of bureaucracy that Weber talked about, which in the abstract is also very good, is rules and regulations. In other words, you avoid chaos. You have things that you can look to if you've got a problem, a new problem. You can decide disputes within the organization. You can even wiggle a little bit within the rules and regulations in order to deal with special circumstances, but you have them there to rely upon. And when you think back to what might have happened prior to Weber's day in a pre-industrial kind of world, you can see why it would be important to have that kind of structure and framework to rely upon. So those are the 5 features of bureaucracy as Weber saw them.
Okay. Well, let's explore the interpersonal one again a little bit, and then maybe we can go to the others. From my understanding of history, prior to the Industrial Revolution, there wasn't a need for bureaucracy as much as when the Industrial Revolution came, and you had to have this division of labor, and organizations, both nonprofit and profit organizations, began to grow.
Well, and as you know, the concentration of people in urban areas meant that you had to deal with all kinds of new difficulties and more people at one time. Everything became more intense. So that's how we came up with terms like case workers in social services and so on. The danger there is that instead of seeing human beings as human beings, you do see them as cases.
Right.
You see them as numbers. You see them as little pegs fitting in little holes. And that can be a problem just as much in human services organizations, which are supposedly dedicated to helping human beings,
Right.
as it can in the military or in correctional facilities.
Right.
It can happen anywhere.
Of course, because by working for the college in a correctional facility, I deal with 2 distinctly different bureaucracies. I deal with the school and its hierarchy and its rules, and I deal with corrections and their hierarchy and their rules. And they have 2 different agendas. Mm-hmm. And my job essentially is to balance the 2 of them. Because if one is happy and the other isn't happy, then you're not successful no matter how you no matter how you look at it.
Well, that points up the importance of rules and regulations. Obviously, a correctional facility is a total organization. It's a total environment, and it is built on adherence to rules and regulations.
Absolutely.
Even